I'm Hannah Spicijaric. I'm a Time for Kids reporter, and I'm here interviewing Lois Lowry. She is the author of many books and the new book, The Willoughbys, and I'm here to ask some questions. Okay. The Willoughbys is completely different from all your books. Where did you get the idea for such a funny book?
See, I knew you were going to ask me that first because it's the hardest question. No, don't be sorry. It's the question that most people are interested in. Where did you get the idea? And it's so hard to answer because, you know, ideas are always there simmering in your mind, and some of them come from your own past. And I have a very long past because I go way back. So I think it probably came originally from the kind of books that I read when I was young, and kids don't read anymore that kind of book. You are the first kid I've talked to who's read the book, so it's nice to hear that.
Really? It was a great
Wouldn't it be awful if the first kid I talked to who had read the book hated it?
Oh, I would.
Yeah, that would not be good.
Did you always intend to write books for children and young adults?
You know, I thought of myself as a writer for adults. And I had majored in writing in college and all of that. And I was writing for grown-ups. And then I published a short story for adults, which was about a child. And it was told through the viewpoint of a child, through the perceptions of a child. It was published for adults, but a children's book editor read it and contacted me and said, would you consider writing a book for young people? Because I think you have a good feeling for the way young people feel. So when that book editor asked me to do that, I did sit down and write my first book for young people. And if you've read that list on my website, I bet you can tell me what it was. It was, indeed. That was my first book. And then I was still writing for both audiences, but I began to hear from young people who wrote to me after they read my books. And I began to see that young people are affected more by what they read than grown-ups are. And so it began to seem more important to me to do that. And so after a while, I stopped writing for adults.
How long did it take you to write The Willoughbys?
I think that particular book didn't take me terribly long. And the reason is because once I got started, you know, it just moves along quite quickly. Flows. Thank you for the word. That's what it does. And I didn't have to spend a whole lot of time delving into the depths of those characters because they're pretty superficial characters. So I'm not answering your question, am I? It took about 2 months, I think, to write it.
I noticed you illustrated The Willoughbys. Have you ever done that before?
I'm not an illustrator, but it was fun just drawing goofy little cartoons, and then they let me keep them. And yes, it is the first and last time I have ever illustrated a book.
What do you hope kids will get out of this book?
I hope they'll laugh out loud the way you said you did, and I hope they will not learn any great lessons about
killing your parents.
Exactly. Yes. Well, oh, you brought it up. I wasn't going to mention that they do kill their parents, but it's, you know, it's a little like you probably when you were younger read James and the Giant Peach. Do you remember how his parents died? First page. They were killed when, I've forgotten whether it was a rhinoceros or a hippopotamus escaped from the London Zoo.
Oh, yes.
Yes,
I remember.
okay. And you can laugh at that because it's just so silly. And same thing when the Willoughbys kill their parents.
Okay. You used a lot of very advanced vocabulary in your book, and you even included a glossary. Did you do this because you wanted kids to learn these words?
I never want to teach kids. If I'd wanted to teach kids, I suppose I would have become a school teacher. But it was fun to use those words, and they seemed to go with the book, with the kind of book it was. But I also knew the kids reading the book. My grandson, for example, is in 4th grade, so he's old enough to read the book, but he wouldn't know what those words mean. And so I thought it would be appropriate to put a glossary at the end, but then I thought it could also be a funny glossary. And I don't know if you read the glossary,
yeah, I did. I actually
but it should make kids chuckle at least.
It's not like a regular dictionary you pick up.
No, it's not boring like a dictionary.
No, because I don't like reading dictionaries.
Well, who does?
You use a lot of other old classic books as references. You even include a brief summary. Do you think of them as outdated, or do you think kids today should still read these books?
I think some of those books are outdated, and yet all of them were books that I read and liked as a kid. But I don't think my own kids would have liked most of them, and I know my grandchildren wouldn't like any of them.
So you don't expect, like, kids
No, kids are not
reading.
going to rush to read those books, I don't think. And yet my description of some of them in the, what did I call that section, not the glossary, but the bibliography.
Yeah.
Some of them might sound intriguing to kids, like one, which I read as a child and liked, about Toby Tyler, who runs away and joins the circus. Now, I can see my grandson thinking, that might be a cool book to read. However, if he finds that book, which is hard to find because it was published long ago, and tries reading it, he's not going to like it much. It's kind of outdated.
You've written all different types of books, including historical fiction, science fiction, realistic fiction, memoirs, and this book. When it comes to writing and reading, do you have a specific genre that you like to write or read?
I don't think I do. Reading, I do have favorites. I love to read memoirs and biographies, but that wouldn't be my choice of what I liked best to write. What I do like, though, is being able to go from one thing to another, because it keeps me from being bored.
Mm-hmm.
And also I think it keeps the reader from being bored. If I wrote the same kind of book all the time, and then a reader said, oh, there's a new Lois Lowry book. Oh, her books are all alike, I don't think I'll read that one. But this one maybe means that a reader could say, oh, this is different. You know, each one is different, and so it's not boring, I hope.
The Willoughbys is your 34th book. Did you ever imagine when you started writing you would have written this many books?
No, and if somebody had told me that, when I published my first book, I was already 40 years old. So if somebody had said, and looking into the future, we see that you're going to write 34 or more books, I would have said, no way. I don't have time left. So it surprises me that I've written so many, and that I still feel I have more left to write.
Out of all the books you've written, do you have a favorite?
Oh, that's hard to answer, and I would answer it differently on different days. I am very fond of the book called The Silent Boy. I think partly I'm fond of it because it's about the time period when my mother was a little girl, and it uses old photographs to illustrate it, and some of them are of my mother as a child.
Oh, really?
And so I loved thinking about and learning more about that time period.
How many rewrites do you have before you are satisfied with your book?
You know, way back when I began writing books, I worked on a typewriter. Kids today don't even know what a typewriter is. It's an archaic instrument. But that meant that if I were rewriting, I would have to retype everything. And that was a lot of work. I'm not a great typist. Now, of course, I work on a computer, and now it's so easy to go back and change things. But it means also that I no longer know how many times I've rewritten something. In the old days, there would be a manuscript, and then another manuscript, and maybe a third.
Now you just go back and change
Now I
it.
just go back and change and change and change, and so I don't have any sense of how many revisions I've done.
Okay, that's all the questions I have for you.
Okay, well, they were good questions.
Thank
and
you.
It was fun to answer them. Thank you.